Hi everybody, today we're going to be working on lesson 4.6 in our Go Math materials. So this is page 265 through 270, So 265 through 270 in our Go Math materials. We're going to be starting on page 265, working through a few of these problems. Please remember I skip around just a little bit, and then at the very end I will assign some practice problems for you to complete. And you will go through, do those, and then you'll submit the Google form with your homework answers, okay? There's a video to show you how to do that if you need extra help with that when you get to that point, okay? So here on page 265, we are going to be moving on to decimal multiplication. So we've already done some decimal multiplication, but today we're expanding on that a little bit. We're going to be reading a few story problems and looking at this a little more in depth, okay? So here it says the distance from we're at the top where it says investigate. The distance from Charlene's house to her school is 0.8 miles. Okay, 0.8 miles. I want you to underline that. Charlene rides her bike 0.7 of the distance and walks the rest of the way. How far does Charlene ride her bike to school? Okay, so it says here you can use a decimal square to multiply decimals. So what they're talking about is this square over here that has the grid. Okay, that's the decimal square that they're talking about. So it says to draw a square with 10 equal columns. So using this grid, we're going to draw a square with 10 equal columns. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, okay? And then it says, what decimal value does each column represent? Well, that would represent 0.1 of that particular big giant square, okay? And I'm going to finish filling in this square. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, I'm not an artist by any means, so don't judge my drawing in the square there, okay? So that's essentially a 10 by 10 square, okay? Then it says, using a colored pencil, shade columns on the grid to represent the distance to Charlene's school. Okay, so I'm going to use red for this particular piece. You do not have to use a colored pencil. You can just use your pencil. You can grab a colored pen if you need it. Okay, whatever's going to help you is totally fine by me. Okay, so it says to shade, use a colored pencil, shade columns on the grid to represent the distance to Charlene's school. Then it says the distance to the school is 0.8 miles. And we got that information from the story problem up top. So I'm going to shade in 8 of these 10 columns. Okay, and I'm going to it doesn't have to be beautiful or perfect. Just going to shade them in kind of roughly, okay? Shade those in. It's actually kind of hard to color on this. I'm using an iPad, and for some reason it's kind of harder to color. Okay. Like I said, doesn't have to be beautiful, doesn't have to be perfect, just roughly, okay? So we've shaded in 8 out of our 10 columns, okay? Then it says, how many columns did you shade? Well, I just said it. We shaded in 8 columns. 8 columns. Okay. Then it says, divide the square into 10 equal rows. Okay, so rows go the opposite way. So I'm going to use black again so we can see it. We're going to divide it into 10 rows this way. Should have drawn the lines before I shaded it red, but I guess this works just as good. Okay, so see how I have now, once I draw those black lines, I have 10 rows. Okay, 10 rows. And then it says, what decimal value does each row represent? Well, that's the same. It represents 0.1. And that's not really the most significant information that we're going to get out of this, because in the end, what we're looking for is the number value, okay? And we're going to talk about that in just a second here. So then the next piece, which is part D, says using a different color, shade rows that overlap the shaded columns to represent the distance to school that Charlene rides her bike. Okay, so I'm going to use green. I'm going to use blue this time. And we're actually going to take the information from up top. So it says Charlene rides her bike 0.7 of the distance. That is the key information there. So we're going to look at this red part and we're going to shade in 7 of the red rows. Okay, 7 of them with blue. And that's going to overlap with the red. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, that's 7 of the rows that were already red. So we've got a little bit of an overlap here. 7 of them. Okay. Notice how I did not shade the white. I only shaded over where I had already colored it red. Okay. We're going to go back to part D. It says, what part of the distance to school does Charlene ride her bike? Well, it told us up there that she rode 0.7, and I actually underlined it in blue for you. Then the next part says, how many rows of the shaded columns did you shade? We shaded in 7 of them. Then it says on part E, and this is where things are a little different, it says, count the number of squares that you shaded twice. So we're looking at just the squares that we shaded with both red and blue. Okay, so the number of squares that I shaded twice, and I can look at that and I can go, okay, I shaded 8 across and 7 down, and I'm actually going to write that, 8 across, 7 down. 8 times 7 is 56. So there are 56 squares. And each square represents 0.01, which is 1/100th of that entire picture. Okay. Then it says to record the value of squares as the product, 0.7 times 0.8, which you can rewrite it if you'd like, but anytime we do, we can rewrite it and we can stack it like this, 0.7 times 0.8. Okay. If we were to do the math, 8 times 7 is 56. We move our decimal point 2 spots, 1, 2, bam. So our answer is 0.56. You don't really have to put the 0 in front of it, but you can if you'd like. And then I'm just going to minimize that so I can see this last part. So Charlene rides her bike for 0.56 miles. Okay, that's a lot of steps to get this problem. I'm going to show you as we work some easier ways to do this, okay? So if you watched that and you were like, wow, Miss V, don't get that, totally don't know what you're talking about, that's okay. We're going to work through a few more of these problems together and we're going to figure this out together, okay? So go ahead and, sorry, I'm just going to click that. Turn to page 266. 266, okay? And we're going to look down at the bottom part, or the second half of this page where it says to make connections. Okay, so let me get my pens here. Markup. Okay. So the bottom half of this page right here where it says make connections is where we're going to start, okay? So it says you can use decimal squares to multiply decimals greater than 1. So if I have a decimal, for instance, 1.29, that's greater than 1, right? Because I have a whole number there. That 1 is a whole number, which makes it greater than 1. Okay, that's like saying I have $1.29. Well, you have more than $1. You have more than a whole dollar, right? Okay, so that's one way to think about it. So it says to multiply 0.3 times 1.4, okay? So we're going to shade some columns here to represent it in the picture off to the side right here in this picture. And then we're going to look at it just as a multiplication problem, and you're going to decide whether you like the picture idea better or you like the multiplication idea better, okay? So step 1 says to shade columns to represent 1.4. Okay, so we're going to do 1.4 first, and I'm going to pull up my pens here. I'm going to use red just because that's easiest. So to do 1.4, I'm going to have to shade in 14 columns. So that's going to be this entire square here. This entire square here. Okay, again, not the most beautiful artist. You guys know this. You've seen me shade in before, okay? So we shaded in that entire square, okay, give or take a few gaps. Then I have to shade in 4 more columns on this side, okay? That represents 1.4. 1.4. All right, there we go. 1.4. Okay, do you agree that that's 14 columns? Yes, we shaded in 10 here and 4 on the other side. Okay, then it says, how many tenths are in 1.4? Well, we just say, okay, we know that because we shaded in 14 columns. So there are 14 tenths. We are done with step 1. Now we're going to look at step 2. It says to shade rows that overlap the shaded columns to represent 0.3. Now, this is where it's a little different. I'm going to use green this time because I'm hoping it'll show up just a little better. We're going to shade in 3, okay, 3 because we have 0.3 rows. But we have to make sure we shade it on the one we shaded in all the way and the one that's only partially shaded, okay? So I'm going to just overlap 3 rows. It's kind of hard to see, but I still want to be able to see my red as well, like that, okay? So I shaded in 3 more rows, 3 additional rows. And that shows me that I've shaded it with both red and green. And that's where I'm going to focus on my answer. My answer is the squares that are shaded both red and green. Okay, so it does say on step 2, that last little part, it says, how many rows of the shaded columns did you shade? Well, we shaded in 3 rows. 3 rows, okay? Then it says to count the number of squares that you shaded twice. So the number of squares that I shaded in both red and green. Well, I can look at it and I can create like a little multiplication problem, right? So I had 14 rows across and 3 rows down. 14 across, 3 down, okay? And that's going to tell me my product. Now, before we do that, I want to look at over here underneath the picture. They gave us a problem right here. So they had 0.3 multiplied by 1.4. So I'm actually going to stack it over here in this blank space next to these pictures. And I'm going to put 1.4 on top because it's bigger than 0.3. We're going to stack them. And we'll come back to these shaded squares in just 1 second. And we're going to do the multiplication, okay? So 3, pretend you don't have decimals for a second. We worry about the decimals at the very end. 3 times 4 is 12. Carry the 1. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 more is 4. Okay? Move my decimal point. I'm going to use blue so you can see this. 1, 2 spots, 1, 2. Put my decimal point. So my answer is 0.42. Now, what does that mean for that picture? What that means is that you've shaded in both red and green 42 squares. Okay? 42 squares. Some of you will like the picture better. If you're a visual learner, you'll like the picture better. Some of you will like just the standard algorithm that I did over here off to the side, okay? Doesn't matter which way you choose. Whatever way works best for you is fine with me, okay? Then we're going to go to page number 267. 267. Uh-oh. Nope, cancel. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Okay, so we're on page 267. At the top where it says share and show. And these are ones we're going to do a few together. We're going to do a couple. I'm going to give you the chance to work through a couple of them. And then you're going to find the answers and we'll come back together. Sorry, I was losing my train of thought there for a second. Let's look at number 2. We have 0.1 multiplied by 0.7. So I want to look and focus on, we're going to use this little picture or diagram. I want to focus on that bigger decimal first. So my larger decimal is 0.7, okay? I'm going to shade in 7 columns, okay? And I'm going to use red to do that. So I'm going to shade in 7 columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way down. Okay, 7 columns I'm shading in red. Then I'm going to focus on that smaller decimal, which is 0.1. And I'm going to use, I'll use green again. Whoops, green. I'm going to use green, and I'm going to shade in just one of the rows that's already red, okay? Just one of the rows that's already red. And it's going to look very tiny because that's a very tiny little row, okay? Then we're going to figure out our answer based on how many squares we've colored in, okay? Now, I've colored in 7 columns, by 1 row. So we know 7 times 1 is 7. But if we look at those shaded squares, that entire picture is 100 squares, and that's only 7 of them. So we've shaded in only 7/100ths of it, okay? Now, the other way you can do that, of course, is 0.7 multiplied by 0.1. Do the math. 1 times 7 is 7. 1 times 1 is 0. Move our decimal point over. 1, 2, 1, 2. Same answer, okay? You can totally do it that way, okay? And I actually want to look at one where we're just doing it that way, okay? And we're just going to kind of ignore the diagram for right now. Let's look at number 3. I'm going to do it that one with just the standard algorithm, okay? So we have 0.4 multiplied by 1.6. We're going to stack 1.6 on top, times it by 0.4, just like so, okay? Then we're going to do the math. 4 times 6 is 24, carry the 2. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 2 more is 6. We move our decimal point 1, 2, 1, 2. Answer 0.64. Put a 0 in the front as a placeholder for that problem. Okay. You can use the diagram, which is the picture, or the standard algorithm, does not matter to me. Okay. I want you to try number 4. And I want you to come back. You can do it either way, using the picture or using the standard algorithm. Come back, pause this video, come back, and then we'll work through this problem together. Okay, you should have paused this video and already worked through problem number 4. So I'm going to take my larger decimal and put it on top, 0.4. My smaller decimal and put it on the bottom, 0.3, and multiply, okay? 3 times 4 is 12, carry the 1. 3 times 0 is 0, plus 1 more is 1. We move our decimal point, I'm going to use blue, 1, 2, 1, 2, 0.12. Now, if you shaded in the picture, you would have shaded in 12 of those squares, okay? Doesn't matter which way you choose to do it, doesn't matter. All right, we are going to go to our homework page, our practice and homework page, which is on page 269 and 270, and I'm going to assign those problems to you. Okay, so 269 and 270, you are going to circle the problems that I'm going to have you work through. You are going to work through them. Now, you can use either the picture or you can use the standard algorithm. It does not matter to me how you do it, as long as you get the correct answer, right? Okay, I want you to work on number 2. Oh, sorry, I've got my pen here. 2, 3, 4, 6, and let's see. 8. Okay, so on page 269, you're working on 2, 3, 4, 6, and 8. Then on page number 270, you are going to work on, let's see, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so on page 270, you're working on 2, 3, and 4. Okay, one more time. On page 269, you are working on 2, 3, 4, 6, and 8. And on page 270, you are working on 2, 3, and 4. Once you're done watching this video, you're going to go and fill out the Google form, or once you've completed your homework, sorry, you're going to go fill out that Google form and submit it to me so that I can see the work that you've done. Have a great day,